There was a time, where we are today, there was a wolf pack that roamed this part of the land. And every year, the uh, the matriarch of the wolf pack would look for a place where she would have her pups. And so this one year, she found a place where there were some big rocks, and right at the edge of these big rocks, there was like a small cave.
Awanzan cave. Awanzan Mahiganak
Wolfpack.
Mahiganak.
The pups were, stayed inside, and they weren't big enough yet to go out. And then one day she decided that she would also go with the wolf pack to go hunting.
Ogenewimasu babysitter. Ogenewimasu.
Something came along and killed the babysitter.
Geuseg hunter. Geuseg.
And then reached inside where the cave was and pulled out, the pups, one by one, and then he put them in a sack, until he got all of them. Put them in a sack, and then he put them over his back and he walked away. He knew that they were going to follow him to try and see because they would follow his scent. So he knew there was a small river close by. And so he walked into the water, and he walked in the water for a long ways until he was comfortable that they would not be able to pick up his trail. After walking for a long, long time, he came upon a great big stone wall. And in this stone wall, it was like a courtyard, and there was a great big metal gate by in that stone wall. And so he unlocked the gate, and he opened it, and he went inside, and he closed it. And as he walked through, then he walked into the middle of the courtyard. In the middle of the courtyard, there was an opening of a large cave. There was an opening there, and so he went inside the cave, and he went way down. He walked for long ways, carrying these puppies. Finally, he came to the end. He came to the bottom of the cave, and then he took the puppies out one by one, and he put a metal collar on them with a chain attached to them. And then he took the chain, and then he put a great big nail into the rock, and he chained them there. And so after they were all chained along the stone wall, then he went outside, and he left them in there. When the matriarch and the wolf pack were on their way home, they had all come from a fresh kill. And as they ran into the camp of where their home was, and the matriarch ran ahead so she could nurse her puppies, and she came upon the sight of the babysitter who had been killed by the unknown and stranger. And so she jumped into where she had her lair and where her puppies were, and when she looked inside, they were all gone. There were no puppies there, and so frantically she ran around searching for her puppies, and she ran all over, and then she couldn't find them. And as the wolf pack started to arrive, they heard what had happened, and so they all started looking, and they looked all over, and then they picked up a trail, but this trail went into the water, and they couldn't pick up the scent after that. And so after many days of searching and running all over the country, the wolf pack then told the matriarch, they said, we can't keep looking. We have to continue our life. So the matriarch said, then I want you to pick someone else to be in my place, someone who will lead you. I will continue the search, I will continue the search for the lost puppies.
And a moose, puppy, and a moose.
And she said, every full moon, I will go up to the highest hill and I will howl out the story of the lost puppies, how we had lost them, so that by chance that they will hear that we didn't give up on them, so that by chance that someone also may hear that there's, and then pass the story on, that the search is still happening for puppies who had been stolen a long time ago. And so she left. But before she left, she also told him, she said, when I'm close, if I cannot complete my search, I want you to send someone else to replace me so that we continue the search until we find them. So they parted ways. The life went on for the wolf pack. The original matriarch then continued her search, and she searched all over the land. And every full moon she would climb to the highest hill, and she would howl out into the moon, into the night, telling her story about the lost puppies, and also that they would, so that they would know the wolf pack had not given up on them. And so she did that for many years until she couldn't continue her search. When she couldn't continue her search, the wolf pack sent out another one, and then this other one, younger one, would continue the search after hearing the instructions from the old matriarch. And so the matriarch laid down, and she passed away.
Mestigomao equio. Matriarch. Mestigomao equio.
And so every full moon, this would be their ritual, that they would howl a story of the lost puppies into the night. In the cave, then when the puppies were all chained to the rock wall, and as their eyes became accustomed to looking in the dark, they could see that there were others like them, that they weren't alone. There were many other puppies who were also chained all over every rock wall there was. And so once a day, someone would come down into the cave, and with a great big bucket would throw food out onto the floor, and then all the puppies would scramble. Sometimes it was only the strongest who would be able to eat, and the youngest ones began to get malnourished, and then they couldn't look after themselves, and so many of them died. And after a while, the nail came out, so that they were able to move around freely, but still with the chain, that they were still dragging the chain around. And this became their way of life inside the cave, because they weren't allowed to go outside. They were only in the dark.
Gichinentagwan. Set free. Gichinentagwan.
There was no one there to tell them how to grow up, how to live like a wolf pack, how to live with each other. And so there was a lot of abuse that happened. There's a lot of violence that happened inside, because there was no one there to keep the law. And so they made their own law, and so there's a lot of the sad and angry things happened inside in the cave. And this is how they grew up, because there was no one else. There was no other way that they knew. When that stranger came down to throw food onto the floor, he also came with him a dog, and this dog would bark at them. And sometimes the dog would stay a little longer, and after a while they began to learn the language of the barking. And so from the language of the barking, they began to hear the story that there was a world outside. And so they began to hear what kind of world it was. from the dog barking to them. So every day he would stay a little longer and tell them about life, what it was like outside. And so after a while, they forgot how to communicate with each other because they were started to bark with each other. And one day, the door was left open at the cave, and so all these young pups, they could see that open door because the light was coming down. So they all cautiously went to the door, and they looked outside, and they were afraid to come outside. They were afraid to come out into the courtyard. But after a while, they got used to it. And so they would go outside into the courtyard during the day and live their life in the courtyard. But at night, they would go back into the cave because that became their home. That was the only home that they ever knew of. So this went on for many generations. And after a while, they forgot how to talk to each other in the wolf language because they were all barking to each other. And one day, one of the young pups, I said the evening was coming, and he could see the full moon coming up over the horizon. Way in the distance, there was hills. And you could see the moon coming up. And as everybody was going down into the cave, he stayed out. He stayed out a little longer. He was just feeling restless. And so he was wandering around alone in the courtyard. And the wind was coming from the direction where the moon was coming, rising. So he sat there with the wind blowing into his face in the breeze. And it was already getting dark, and the moon was coming up. All of a sudden, his ears stood up like this. He heard a sound. He heard a sound that he had never heard before.
We too young, howl. We too young.
And the hair in the back of his neck and his back just stood up. And he ran back and forth along the wall. And he was so excited, he ran back down into the cave, and he got his brothers and sisters, come listen to what I have heard. Come with me. And so a few of them came out. And the dog came out also, because he was curious to hear what it is that this pup had heard. So he told him, come listen. And he said, face this way, because the sound is coming from those hills, he said. And as they sat there quietly, and after a while the breeze came, and he could hear it and pick up the sound. And out below her was an open plain. And as she howled out her story of the lost puppies, howled out her story that the people, the wolf pack, had never given up on them, that the matriarch was still looking for them, howling out her sadness and telling the universe her story of her loss. So the young puppy, when he just ran back and forth, he was just curious and he was just excited. And the puppies, they're all sitting there listening. All of a sudden, the young puppy, he sat back and he lifted his head and he howled. And he howled like he had never howled before, because he had never howled before. All of a sudden, all the puppies, they turned around and looked at him. Here was the same sound, howling coming inside this courtyard. And they all looked at him and they was wondering and believing. The dog heard that also. As soon as he heard the howling of the wolf, he knew this was the sound of an ancient enemy. So as soon as he heard the young puppy howling, he jumped on him. He was going to kill him. So the puppy got away and he ran for his life. He ran round and round and round in the courtyard because he couldn't see any opening. And he knew this dog was not going to have any mercy on him. So he was running for his life. And he ran into the cave because he thought maybe he would find some safety in there, but the dog followed him. And as he ran down, finally he reached the bottom. And the dog hesitated to go inside. And as he looked, as the young puppy's eyes became accustomed to seeing, and he could see around this great big room, that some of the original puppies who had been taken, they were still hanging. They were still hanging in the wall. They were all hanging like this by their chain. And as he walked around, and he began to realize these were same like him. And as he walked to one close by, the chain started kind of almost like it was rattling on one of them. But no longer a puppy, but an old wolf. Because he had died as an old wolf in that cave. Lifted his head up, and he said, "No, some of the meat ano. Kigoy gimanesin. Grandchild, I want to give you something that you need." So the young puppy went over the old wolf, took him by the shoulder, and they turned him around and said, "I want you to take my hands, put them around you." As the young puppy took the old wolf's arms and put them around him, and he could feel the energy coming through him.
Ni Pawaskawin. Energy. Ni Pawaskawin.
But it was a gift. This is a gift that had, timita, no, kapachihman. This, what I give you, will serve you. That's what the old wolf said. Now, nya, tabashi, nya, run for your life. And so with that new energy inside of him, the young puppy ran past the dog, out into the open. And as he ran, and all of a sudden he saw right at where the metal gate was, there was time had rusted. Weather had rusted part of the gate so that there was an opening right on the corner of the gate. So he knew that if he could dive in there and come out on the other side, he would be safe. He would be out of the courtyard. So he dove in there. As he dove in, suddenly something got caught, got snagged. And he realized that he was wearing an iron collar that he had forgotten about a long time ago. He knew he had to break free of that iron collar because the dog was already on the other side of him, already biting his leg and trying to pull him back. And so he knew he had to save himself. He had to bust free of that collar.
Gitchinen Tagwan. Set free. Gitchinen Tagwan.
So remembering the energy of his grandfather, and then he said, "Moso, wichihin." Grandfather, help me. So in desperation, then he broke and he took this collar and he broke it. Then he was able to go out on the other side. Paspiso. When he came out on the other side, then he ran to where the moon was coming up over it. He ran where that sound was coming from. The dog didn't follow him because there was no longer, the old enemy was no longer inside the courtyard. So the puppy ran and ran and ran. After running for a long ways, finally he came to the foothills and started running up the hill in the trees. And after running uphill for a long time, there's one big hill that he came up and you could see near the top when the moon was really bright. You could see an opening. And as he came out into the opening, you could see this. Someone standing at the top of the hill, sitting there and howling into the night. There's the one who was howling for him. And he ran up and he went face to face with her. And his puppy looked up and he saw the matriarch. The matriarch who had never been chained before. A matriarch who had lived her life of being who she was. Who was speaking in her own language. He couldn't understand her. But after a while, he also began to be afraid of her because she had so much energy and power. He backed off. He backed away. He didn't know what to do with it. He backed away, turned around, and then he ran back down. And he looked back and he said, how can I go up there, So he was halfway down the hill. So he stayed there for a long time. And after a while, he decided, I have to go get my brothers and sisters. I have to go find them. I have to go break them free. That's the only thing left for me to do, he said. So he went back down. And at night, where the courtyard was, as he looked where the wall was, all there was just a pile of rubble where the stone wall was. And he looked at the gate was no longer shut, it was open, but it all rusted away. So he went in there and there was no dog there. The dog was gone. So he went to the middle where the cave was and he went inside. And all of a sudden they saw him coming in and they all ran. What did you see? What did you do? We saw the dog was going to kill you. He said, I escaped and I found other ones that looked like us. They're calling us. That howling in the wind is our grandmother calling us. So he said, come with me, come with me. But they were scared to come out.
Nasegson, scared. Nasegson.
Because they had never lived any other life. A few of them came out, but after a while they returned back. They were scared to come out. So he took them all and they followed him. And they went way down to the bottom of the cave. And they looked around and they saw these old wolves, men and women, who had been chained to the wall and had died on the wall with the collar around their neck. This one called me and said, come here, grandson, come here, grandchild. And he gave me something. And as they all looked around, they could begin to hear chain moving. They begin to hear and see the ones who were chained, hanging lifelessly on the walls were moving. And they began to hear a stump nosem, inotemitano, a stump, pinatoma. What they heard was, grandchild, come here. I want to give you this gift. So they went around. And some were brave enough to go and experience the same thing that the young pup had experienced. And as they felt the arms around them and they felt the energy, but many of them also were scared. And they stayed by the entrance. They waited for daylight. But all the ones who had gained a gift from the grandmothers and grandfathers stayed longer inside. The young puppy said, "Let's go now. Let's go." And so they all left. And he walked past the ones who were afraid to take the energy of the old ones. And he walked past and he went out the door. He went out the courtyard. They didn't have to use the gate anymore. They could just climb over the rubble. And so they went looking. They went looking for the one who was howling, the matriarch.